Hey guys, it's Laura from Lightning Cosplay. This time I'm finally showing you how I made the cyberpunk inspired Oni mask I made a while ago. The mask is highly inspired by the Samurai logo and I just added some nice little extras like horns and LEDs. So let's get started. I love the original design of the Samurai logo, especially the mechanical part on the eye area, but I think there was missing something. Traditional Oni masks have horns, so I definitely wanted to add them to the design. I found a mask design on Etsy, which is actually sold as a patch, but it combines both aspects about the design I like, the horns and the mechanical eye, so I took this as my main reference. For sculpting, I like to use monster clay in medium. It is an oil and wax-based clay which you can heat up to make it softer. I have a wide range of sculpting tools I like to use, but I think the loop tools are the ones I use the most. As base for the sculpture, I used a live cast of my head, which we made some years ago. The start is always the hardest part for me. Even though I'm sculpting a lot, I always struggle with it and I don't know how to begin. At first you just need to figure out the very rough base shape and then just continue to build up the sculpture step by step. The most difficult part is always the symmetry. So when I add something to one side of the mask, I immediately do the same step on the other side. For me, this is the best way to keep track on the symmetry and how much clay I added and how I shaped a specific part. For this mask, I luckily only had to sculpt one eye area because to the other half I'm gonna add the 3D printed mechanical piece. The most fun for me is working on the details. Then the sculpture slowly starts to become alive, if you know what I mean. You can slowly see your vision come to life. The mechanical eye part was really a challenge. We first 3D modeled the base plate without any details, printed it and checked if it fits. As you can see, the shape was too big, so we did some adjustments and printed it again. This one was way better. In total, we printed 6 different versions to find the perfect fit and design. The prototypes were printed with ABS and the final one was then printed with resin. Resin printers are great for small detailed pieces like this one. Before adding it to the mask, I sanded and primed the print and gave it a nice gloss finish. The horns and the long teeth were also 3D printed, by the way. They will later be casted separately. Then it was time to mold the mask. For masks like this, I like to make a brush-on silicone mold. For that, I use Rebound 25 from Smooth-On. As I already said, the horns and the teeth were molded and casted separately. To save silicone, I also made an easy brush-on mold. I only added like 3 coats of silicone, which is quite thin, but I didn't need a very durable mold since I only wanted to make 2 to 4 casts. To keep the silicone mold in shape, you need a hard outer shell. I always make mine out of epoxy resin. For the first coat, I use EpoxaCoat Grey. This is a very thick epoxy resin and great to create hard shells for your molds. I apply 1 thick coat. After about 2 hours, when the EpoxaCoat is still a bit sticky, I start to add Fiberglas Cloth with EpoxAmite, which is an epoxy resin you can use for laminating. The next day I remove the aluminum foil. I recommend applying a release agent before you continue working with epoxy resin. The second half of the shell is the same process as the first one. The combination of fiberglass cloth and epoxy resin leaves very sharp edges, so I use my rotary tool to smooth the surface. This is super important, believe me, you don't want to cut yourself on this sharp fiberglass. To crack the epoxy shell open, we always start by using a slot screwdriver and popsicle sticks. You see, opening this was pretty easy. Time to see if the silicone mold was a success. Don't worry when you destroy your sculpture when removing the silicone. You now have a perfect mold and don't need the clay sculpture anymore. I trimmed the edges of the mold just to make it all look nice and clean. But don't cut away too much, you still need an overflow area for the casting process. And this is the finished mold. You can drill holes through the middle part of the epoxy shell and screw both halves together, or if you are lazy like me, you can also just use rubber bands. For casting I use Smoothcast 65D from Smooth-On. This is a resin which cures pretty fast and is perfect for slush casting or roto casting. It cures white, which is good, that way you can see that one coat of resin isn't enough, some areas are still super thin. So let's do a second one. After waiting until the resin is fully cured, it's time for demolding. This is always super satisfying. The cast came out perfect, no bubbles or other imperfections. I am super happy. I also did a solid cast of the teeth and a hollow cast of the horns. First off, this makes the whole mask a lot more lightweight, and later I want to add LEDs to the horns. I also casted these little tube thingies. For the solid casts I use Smoothcast 325 with white pigments. Next it's time to remove the excess material. For this I like to use an X-Acto knife and sandpaper to smooth the edge. For the holes for the horns, the eye and the nose I used my rotary tool, I just forgot to film it. Before I could start painting, I masked the mechanical and the mouse part. First I applied a base coat, which works like a primer and helps the paint stick better to the resin. Then I applied a dark red metallic spray paint. When it comes to metallic spray paint, I really like the ones from Montana. Well, the masking was not super perfect, but still okay. I could clean the teeth with some acetone. Now the fun part. The black and the red give the mask such a nice contrast. To bring out the details of the mechanical part, I sprayed on some black with my airbrush and wiped it away with a dry paper towel. A rough poured sponge is good to add a bit of weathering to your piece. I thought the whole mask needed more texture. You need to thin down the acrylic color with water before stippling it on. You just want to get a very light textured layer, not cover everything up. To glue on the teeth and the horns, I used 2K epoxy glue. I personally really like the super instant glue from Smooth On. Of course, the horns also needed a bit color. To get the perfect cyberpunk look, I gave the whole mask a super shiny top coat. Even when the vision with the mask will be even worse, I still decided to add a LED to the mechanical eye part. To light up the horns, we used the Neopixel Mini Skinny from Adafruit. And here it is, the Cyberpunk Samurai inspired mask. I love everything about this project and I had so much fun creating it. I hope you love it as much as I do. I love creating masks and headpieces, so if you have any good ideas of what I could do next, let me know in the comments. This was such a fun project and I hope I will have the time to do something like this more often in the future. I hope you enjoyed watching the full progress, and if yes and you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and then hopefully see you next time. Bye bye!